Today I'm going to be showing you how to build a winning abandoned cart email flow. We're going to start with the strategy. We're going to talk about some best practices, and then I'm going to dive into Klaviyo to show you exactly how to build this whole thing out step by step. All right, so the well-known abandoned cart flow. So we're not going to be going into extreme depth here. I just want to give you the core basics so that you know from a high level how to build this out the right way. So before we even start, there are a few things that we have to consider here. Are we going to be giving away any offers? What are the top objections that we get? Do we have any unique selling propositions that we can speak to in this flow? How much education is needed to sell what we sell? These are all the types of things that you want to be thinking about when it comes to planning out what type of content you're going to put in this flow. Now, another really important point to make here is that we're talking about abandoned cart flow here, but a lot of brand owners get confused when it comes to abandoned cart versus abandoned checkout. So I'm actually going to change this to abandoned cart / checkout flow. If you think about a website, right? When someone adds an item to their cart and then they abandon, that's abandoned cart. But when they go to their cart and then advance to the checkout page and then they abandon, that's an abandoned checkout. They're similar, but they're different. We want to make sure we have a separate flow for both. Because the important caveat here is that this part, the top objections that you get, are going to be different based on where they abandon. If you're on a website and you're looking at the checkout stage, the objections that someone will have there are going to be more so based around price or around shipping or shipping times. Whereas at the cart level, there are, little tweaks and differences in terms of what the objection might actually be. For example, maybe in your little side screen modal thing, you had like some free shipping offer that they didn't qualify for, so that made them abandon. Or maybe you do some other thing there that, leads to people abandoning for whatever reason. There's a lot of ways you can go with this, but the main thing to consider is look at your website, go through the journey as a customer and decide and figure out what are the top objections that people would have at this stage. If they got to the abandoned cart or checkout flow, it means they were high intent, so it's very important that we strategically think through that part. Now, offers. So you can incentivize people to complete this order with different offers. Some common ones are gonna be like 10% off their order, 15% off their order. Some people go as high as like 20, 25% off their order, which I don't necessarily recommend unless you wanna hurt your margins. You can also go with something like free shipping. But the most important thing that you wanna consider here is when you're gonna drop these offers in. And are you gonna make them a limited time offer? Because for example, we'll have some scenarios where we'll build out this abandoned cart or checkout flow and then not give them any offers until they're at the later stages of that flow. That way it's more of like a last ditch effort rather than giving everybody immediately that abandons their cart that offer. Now, when I talk about unique selling propositions, I'm talking about the unique aspects of your brand or your company that you want people to know in order to get them to buy. Because you watching this, if you run a brand, like unless you're doing like some generic thing, you probably have something that's really unique about you. You want to communicate that because as much as you just assume everyone knows it, they usually don't, unless you heavily communicate it. And at this point, how much education is needed? So if you're selling t-shirts or watch straps or something like that, or like, I don't even know, glasses, there's not a whole lot of education that's really necessary there. However, if you're selling something like a supplement or something that requires more education in order for it to be purchased, we have to consider that because they're probably abandoning for one of those reasons. This kind of goes hand in hand with the objections point right here. We want to handle the objections that they have. We want to give them the education that's required in order to get them to buy. E-commerce and whatever type of company you run, it's not easy times nowadays where you can just throw out some random incentive and people will buy. They have a lot of different options, so you need to actually be strategic and think like a real marketer with these points. Now, best practices, you want minimum 3 emails in this flow, and ideally you have about 5 emails. And then you want to be adding emails onto the back end of this flow if the current ones are performing well. Because if people are going to continue on through and not make a purchase yet and leave the flow, we may as well give them better content to continue attempting to convert them there. Now, the other important aspect of this is to exclude them when they continue down the sales funnel. And I'm going to get into this when I show you the technical build out in Klaviyo. But if someone adds an item to their cart and then they get to checkout and then they purchase, obviously they shouldn't be in the abandoned cart flow. So you want to make sure your filtering and your technical aspect of this is set up properly. All right, so now let's cover the technical aspect of how to build this out in Klaviyo. If you're not using Klaviyo and you're using an inferior sending platform like MailChimp, any of these other ones, it's going to be a similar process and you're going to do essentially the same things, but you're just not going to see the exact same setup that I'm doing here in Klaviyo. All right, so first you're going to navigate to this flows page right here on your left tab. Then you're going to click create flow. All right, and then you're going to type in right here cart. Now this is the important part. So like I said, abandoned cart and abandoned checkout are different. So they need to have a different trigger to begin the flow. So as you can see here, these also have different integrations. So if you're using Shopify, it's gonna have a different trigger than BigCommerce. I'm gonna click this drop down here just to show Shopify for an example. So as you can see right here, abandoned cart reminder, that has an added to cart trigger. That's what we want. Now this one, abandoned cart reminder, if I click on that, as you can see right there, the trigger is when someone started checkout or checkout started. That is your abandoned checkout flow, not abandoned cart. So I'm gonna choose the abandoned cart reminder, and then we're gonna click here. You can add any tags if you want to here or change the name. I'm just gonna click test abandoned cart and use template. So now we're in the flow and this is the trigger. So the important aspect here is these profile filters. So there are two main categories of filters that you want in your abandoned cart and your abandoned checkout flows. The first type of filter is gonna stop them from receiving this flow if they continue down the sales funnel. The second type of filter here is going to be a time-based one. So right here, you can see these two profile filters that are already built into this. These are to stop them from joining this flow if they continue down the sales funnel. So profile filters, checkout started 0 times since starting this flow. This is telling Klaviyo, if they've started checkout after starting this flow, don't leave them in the flow. So we're saying checkout started 0 times since starting this flow. If they qualify for that, cool. And then at the same time, place order 0 times since starting this flow. Because the general sales funnel here goes active on site, viewed product, added to cart, checkout started, placed order. So if they add to cart, because again, added to cart is the metric here. If they add to cart, they get hit with this trigger. But we want them to stop and get excluded from the flow right here if they start a checkout or if they place an order. Now that second category of filter here is that time-based one. So if someone abandons a cart, we don't want them to go through this flow multiple times right after they were just in it. Just because then they're receiving the same content pretty much back to back on a repetitive basis, and we just want to avoid that. All right, so now let's build out the actual flow. So for this first time delay, we've honestly found that the quicker it is, the better. Most of the time now, we're either setting this to 1 hour or we're setting it to about 30 minutes. And then important note, we like to separate out SMS flows from email flows. So you'll see a lot of brands here, they'll put the SMS in with it. We just like to separate it for data reasons. It's just easier to navigate and organize that way. So we're gonna go with this setup right here where right after the wait, they get the first email. Now, pro tip after this first email. So you can do something where you drag in this conditional split thing right here, drag it right there. And then you can set this conditional split up like this. So what someone has done or not done, they've opened an email at least once since starting this flow. And then I'm gonna save that. So if they've opened an email at least once since starting this flow, they go down the yes path. If they haven't, they go down the no path. And then what you want to do is you want to literally click these 3 dots, clone this email, and then drag it to here. Now, important, make sure you add the time delay before the conditional split so that they have to wait after that email before hitting the conditional split. Maybe we do 1 day here. And now this email right here is going to be the exact same content from email 1, but you're going to change the subject line. Because remember, these people that are receiving this haven't seen email 1 yet. They just saw the subject line in the preview text, if they saw that at all. So we're just giving them another chance to open this first email since that first email is the highest converting email anyways. Now on the yes path, you might drag in this email number 2. And then after that repeated email, you might add a time delay. And then what you want to do is grab this little conjoin thing here, grab that and then drag it back to here. So now the way this flow is built out is that they get email 1, they wait a day. If they've opened that email, they continue on to email 2. If they haven't opened that email, they get the repeat. And then they wait another time delay before getting the next email. And from here, typically the best way that we'll do is just build out time delays and emails. Now you can strategize those however that makes sense for your brand or your business specifically, but you can just tack these on as much as you need to. And yeah, build a high converting flow just like that. So yeah, hope this is helpful. If you have any questions on anything that I didn't quite cover here, just drop them in the comments. If you want to use AI to help you build out this abandoned cart flow, I have a full completely plug and play system that I'm gonna leave in the top link in the description. You can get it completely free. We literally use that internally to help guide all of our email copy, design, email creation, everything. So that'll be top link in the description. And if you want my full course on email and SMS marketing, that's popping up on the screen right here. At the very least, drop a like, subscribe to this, and I'll catch you in the next video.